So podcasts have been around for 20 years, right? And so many people, even probably 2019, I'd give my elevator pitch and they'd say, "What's a podcast?"
Yes.
And today, what's a podcast? Well, 51% of the US adult population listens to podcasts. Studies say on average, they're above average income, above average education. They're early adopters, right? They're looking for answers. But what is a podcast? It used to be, well, it's an audio only, sent through an RSS feed. Well, now if it's on Facebook, is it a podcast? If it's on YouTube, which is the number one search engine now for podcasts, does that still count? Right? If somebody hears this show because it's simulcast on Sirius or XM or picked up by terrestrial radio, is that a podcast?
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'm super glad that you're with us here today because I'm here with my most amazing guest, Tom. Tom, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Michelle, I am thrilled to be here.
Nice. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
I am Tom Schwab. I am the Chief Evangelist Officer for Interview Valet, and we help leading brands and thought leaders get featured on targeted podcast interviews so they can talk directly to their ideal clients.
Love it. How did you get into that as your thing?
Well, it only makes sense in the rearview mirror, right? It's more evolution than revolution. And so my last company was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. And we built the entire thing up with guest blogging and built that company up, sold it off. And then about 2014, some people said, "Well, how did you grow that?" And I'm like, "I have blogs, but they don't work anymore." So I started to hypothesize that you could use podcast interviews like we used to use guest blogs 25 years ago. We tested it, it worked, and it's been a lot of fun ever since.
You're preaching to the choir. Sorry, peeps. I'm going to say I love it. I love it. I love it on this whole episode because I'm sure I do. So let's talk about kind of podcast episodes and guessing. Why is that the new blogging for you, if you will? Why is that the new thing?
Well, I think it's the new old thing, right?
Okay.
Because this idea of borrowing other people's audience has been around forever, right? Borrowing that trust, the know, like, trust. That's what people did 50 years ago when they talk at the Rotary Club or the Country Club, as seen on TV. It's the same thing we're doing here. Guest blogging was a version of that. And it's this idea, I think, especially today, of don't worry about breaking through the noise, right? So many people are trying to break through the noise. And I think if we're honest, we're all just adding to it. I'd much rather get in on the conversation that people are already listening to, right? I could be yelling at all of your listeners, but they're not going to hear me because they've got their earbuds in. They're listening to Michelle on the podcast here and the people that she vets, she wants to bring on as guests. So I really think it's an old strategy that's just being used here with, the current technology where people are listening.
So give us an idea of kind of the state of podcasts. Like, what does the industry look like? For those who are unfamiliar with it, they might have been given this link to somebody by somebody and going, "Here, listen to this." They're like, "What is that? What am I listening to?" So pretend they know nothing about it. What is the kind of state of affairs right now as far as podcasts go?
So podcasts have been around for 20 years, right? And so many people, even probably 2019, I'd give my elevator pitch and they'd say, "What's a podcast?" And today, what's a podcast? Well, 51% of the US adult population listens to podcasts. Studies say on average, they're above average income, above average education. They're early adopters, right? They're looking for answers. But what is a podcast? It used to be, well, it's an audio only, sent through an RSS feed. Well, now if it's on Facebook, is it a podcast? If it's on YouTube, which is the number one search engine now for podcasts, does that still count? Right? If somebody hears this show because it's simulcast on Sirius or XM or picked up by terrestrial radio, is that a podcast? I don't know. really, you just want the bigger thing is, are you connecting with people? And I think there's a lot of problems in the world today, Michelle,
Mhm.
but there's no better time to be alive, right? Because the technology we have, we can talk with people throughout, throughout the world and throughout time, right? Just because you release this on one day doesn't mean somebody else isn't listening to it 6 months from now. Or the
20
studies
years from
also
now.
years from now, and the studies say that 70% of all podcasts are listened to sped up. So it's one of the few mediums where you can listen where you want, when you want, and at the speed you want.
That's why I talk really fast so that they can't do that.
I,
Some of the
I,
guests I have, it's quite hilarious. It's like, well, they're not 2X in this one.
I, I used to do that, and then a buddy of mine came back and he said, "Why did you call the company Interview Ballet?" And I'm like, "No, it's Interview Valet with
Val.
a V."
V-
I said, "Ballet, that's stupid." And he's like, "Yeah, I thought so too, but you say it so dang fast. That's what I heard."
If you're going
And
to
it's
speak
like,
fast, you have to over enunciate,
yes, slow
especially your
down.
name and especially phone numbers. That one drives me nuts. Your name is very familiar to you, but you got to over enunciate it, and phone number. It drives me crazy when people leave messages go, "Hi, how you doing? Call me back at," no, no, other way around. Awesome. So you mentioned terrestrial radio, and I went, "Oh, I wonder if we're on extraterrestrial radio. That'd be fun to find out." They're all thinking we're insane, going, "No, we'll just hang out a little longer until they evolve." So, all good. So until we evolve and people are getting their messages out there, who do you think is best positioned to take advantage of podcasting and podcast guesting right now?
I think it's really people that are doing relationship um, sales and professional services, things that have a high value, high touch, where you have to understand what is that company doing, right? It could be we do a lot with category design, right? Where somebody's got a different way of doing something that they've got to explain, right? I see it, the world as there's transactions and then there's relationships. So if somebody's just trying to do a transaction of, hey, I'm trying to sell the newest disposable earplugs or disposable earbuds, right? I put mine through the wash like every couple of weeks. So I still use the wired ones. I don't have to know about that, right? But if it's somebody that's got a different view of something, they've built a different solution, they understand a problem in a different way. I think that takes a relationship. I heard somebody say that products are sold, but services are bought. And I think more and more today, we're finding that, right? I may go to Amazon to buy a product, right? But I'm actually going out and talking to friends, searching, listening to podcasts in order to buy a service, right? Because there's so much more to that.
Absolutely. We were looking at one client who is an engineering company. And I said, that would be fascinating because they know so much about their thing and to be able to articulate. And they're like, yeah, but it works better with pictures. And I said, so do it on video and describe the video or have some color commentary afterwards or voiceover or whatever. Like there's so many ways we could figure out how to do this. And if I'm fascinated with it and I know nothing about it, you can well imagine the people that actually know about it, what's going on, if they want to listen to that. So I'm thinking, even though you may not have the most articulate team, and I'm thinking like the engineers, the techs, the guys that love to, I say guys, I mean everybody that love to kind of hit the keyboard or they're in their head and they like to think about the thing, but they can still become articulate if given the right avenue to be able to entice people with what is the problem that they solve and how do they solve it. That becomes fascinating.
It does. And sometimes if it's a visual, it can actually help you, not hurt you. And it's
Okay.
sort of counterintuitive.
Right.
But when you're talking about something, it's very easy to say, just come back to the website. I've got the diagram there, the flow chart, a webinar that shows this. We do a lot of nonfiction book tours, and I'll never forget Vincent Puglisi wrote a book called Freelance to Freedom. And Vincent was a professional photographer for like the NHL, NFL, World Wrestling, and he would tell stories. And then he would just say, just come back to the website. I'll put that picture up there. And people would come back to his website just to see the picture. And I think that's a great way to move people along from just being a passive listener to your podcast to an active visitor to your website, and then ultimately an engaged lead.
Right. Well, especially if they're interested in the topic and they, if they're the kind of people that need to see spreadsheets and you go, hey, there's a spreadsheet over there. And they're like, yes, this is awesome. Good to see a spreadsheet. Right. They're
And
out there.
And it is, and that's the kind of magnetic marketing. I always have
Right.
said, the better the marketing, the easier the sales, right? So if the marketing is really bad, you might get lots of leads, but you've got to get, a half dozen sales development reps to go through to figure out which ones are good and which ones aren't, right? So if the marketing is good, it's more magnetic. So it attracts the right people and repels the wrong people. So if your people love spreadsheets, and your offer is, if you come back, you can see the spreadsheet, you can download it and you can use it. It's in Excel and it's got all the macros in it. Your ideal people are going to come. Your people that aren't ideal, they're going to self-select out. And that's fine because, doesn't mean they're bad or you're bad. It just means you're not going to be a good fit. So why not determine that before you start investing money into it?
Nice. I do know a lot of people are afraid of that polarity, and I see that as something that they're doing incorrectly. And to me, you want to create that polarity so that your ideal audience will sift themselves out. What do you see are some of the other issues, or you can comment on that too. I tend to ask 20 questions. That's whichever one suits you. So other than that, what are some of the problem or some of the mistakes that you see people making when they're doing their promotion?
Oh, I definitely see what you're talking about there. The idea that I want to talk to everybody,
Mhm.
right? Not everybody wants to hear you. And you don't have value that you can offer to everyone.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, I want to talk to everyone. I want to be on the Joe Rogan podcast. Well, it's a great podcast, but if he doesn't have your listeners, why would you want to be there? It's like this idea of, I want to, I want to fish for sharks, right? So I'm going to go to the Great Lakes because Lake Michigan is huge, right? So I've got a bigger opportunity there, right? No, it's like it doesn't work there. Figure out where your ideal customers are, and I often will tell people and remind them that bigger is not better, better is better. And there's a great book out there called Super Consumers by Eddie Yoon. Eddie's been a client of ours numerous times, and he wrote it with Harvard Business Review. And he talks about in consumer products goods, the people that have really done it well market to the super consumers. And like one of the examples he uses in there is American Girl dolls, right? They don't market to everybody. They market to the people that buy every one and every accessory, because if you do that, your marketing dollars make a bigger impact, and then those people will market to everyone else. So a lot of times when we're talking to people that come to us and say, I want to do podcast guesting, I want to talk to everyone. And I'm like, no, who are your super consumers? Who are the people that are nice people, but wouldn't be your ideal customer? And then to look at it and say, podcast guesting is a tactic, right? Podcast interview marketing is a strategy. It's almost like you wouldn't post two things to Facebook and go, yeah, I'm doing social media marketing. No, you're not. You're just posting there. And it's the same way with podcast interview marketing. Just doing a couple random podcast interviews will not move the needle. So we really look at that and say, what's the strategy behind that? Who do you want to talk to? What do you want them to do? And then even how are you measuring this? Because if you don't have the measurements, you'll never know what's working and what isn't.
Well, and to give you another example of this, peeps, while you're listening to this, in case that does make sense, is my show is very much for entrepreneurs, for business owners wanting to build their businesses, and what are the tactics or strategies? How do you find the support that you need when you need it? to be able to do the job and the mindset. I do not focus my attention on unions. they they're not probably not listening to this, and if they are, they're the renegade going, oh yeah, this is really boring, I could totally go into my own business, like jump the waters, go ahead. Those are the one-offs. That is not my audience. Business owners, absolutely. Right. And I just think it's so important to understand that if I'm ticking off some union workers, it's like, I don't care. I don't care. Your job to me as an entrepreneur is to stand out, be you, be awesome, and you're going to break all the rules of union work. So we talk about being you and breaking all the rules. So if you used to be in a union or you used to be an employee, it's going to be terrifying to step into your own self and do things because you want to do them. And that's the support I want to give you is, yes, go do it.
Years ago, Michelle, I was covering the phones for a previous company that we had over lunch, and a client came and he said, you guys are just like Preparation H. And I stopped and I said, excuse me?
So?
And he's like, no, it's a compliment. And I'm like, so telling me that we're like hemorrhoid cream is a compliment. And he's like, yeah, because nobody cares about your product or service. He said, all they really care about is the pain in the rear end. And he's like, you came recommended. You gave me fast relief, right? You took away the burning pain in my rear end. And that really struck me. And it's like, yeah, when you get on a podcast, you talk about the pains that people go through, not just, hey, here's my widget. Isn't it cute? Right. If you talk about their pains, people will say, yeah, I resonate with that. And then there are other people that say, I have no idea what they're talking about. That's okay. Right. It doesn't mean they're bad or you're bad. It's just, they're not your ideal customer.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier, and doing one or two guesting isn't going to do it. What does somebody have to do other than go and talk to you, or of course, to be able to kind of stretch that out and go, okay, what is the benefit of guesting? What is the benefit of hosting? Kind of what are some of the things that they want to kind of wrap their head around before they go marching into going, hey, this is a great use of my time?
Well, first of all, I'm not here to sell anything. I'll give away my book. If you stick to the end, I'll tell you where you can get it for free. But we always start with, why? What's your goal? And the goal is not to just be on a podcast interview. That's sort of an ego thing. But what are you trying to do? Are you trying to launch a book? Are you trying to hit a list? Are you trying to get a different point of view out there? Like category design, establish an entire new category of saying, this is how it used to work. This is how I see it working. It could be for thought leadership, right? We've had clients before that had their entire C-suite out on podcast interviews. And this was especially during COVID, where they needed to be out there. Some people will do it for the search engine optimization value, right? Every time you're on a podcast, they're giving you backlinks. And those are so valuable because they're earned backlinks. Other people are using it as a lead generation tool where they'll put offers out there and invite people to come back. So it's a lead gen tool. Other people are really looking at it as a business development tool, right? Especially the bigger the relationship sale, the more conversation it takes, right? One of the frustrations I have is that phrase, you're one funnel away, right? Everybody, you just need to make a funnel. Well, if funnels work so well, how come Boeing and Airbus aren't selling planes off of Facebook ads and funnels? Or how come you never see,
Wow, you can't buy a Boeing off a Facebook ad? So disappointed.
Maybe I'm not on the right feed, but even
maybe my algorithm's not fitting it.
or even sometimes people with professional services, they'll be out there trying to copy what works for a small transaction and saying, well, I'm going to use this for a high ticket or a B2B sale. And I'm like, if that works so well, how come you don't see, Ernst & Young and Bain and all of these huge consulting firms that do B2B? Well, if it worked, they would be doing it also. We had one client that came to us, and I always start with the same question. Why do you want to do podcast interviews? And I loved his answer, Michelle. this guy was a high level consultant, right? And he said, because I see most of digital marketing as the equivalent of advertising above a urinal. And I just paused and I'm like, you got to explain this one to me. And he's like, well, if one of my clients saw me advertising on a park bench, or they saw me advertising on the bus or in a restroom, that would be a reason for them not to hire me. He says, I don't want to be seen on TikTok doing a dance, or, doing the challenge on Facebook. He's like, no, my people want to see me where they're making the buying decision. So I want to make sure that I am on places where it builds up my trust, builds up my authority, where I can have a meaningful conversation, not just be seen as they're scrolling along. So I think there's a lot of different reasons to do podcast interviews. And the one I always point out to people is that, they'll say, well, should I be a guest or a host? And I'm like, it's not an either or, right? It's like, should I be an Uber driver or an Uber passenger? Same platform, but what are your goals? Right. So being a host is a great way to nurture your current leads, nurture your current clients. But if you want to get new leads, if you want to get new exposure, then being a guest is a great way to do that.
So in a moment, I'm going to ask you for an example of a Cinderella story. But before I do that, we're going to pause for a second, and you're going to have to wait, peeps.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
I am so excited to hear. Give us an example of a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Yeah, Michelle, one that came to mind is a CMO came to us, and they had a company. They were based out of Australia, trying to break into the US market. And it was a B2B software company. And they've tried a lot of different things. They did the Facebook ads, they did SEO, and nothing was gaining traction. And they had a great product, right? They just had to tell their story to break through the noise. So I talked with the CMO, and then we did a conversation with the CEO, and I'll never forget this. This was the shortest sales conversation I think I've ever had. The CEO stopped me and he goes, "Hold it. You're telling me that you're going to get me on a podcast with at least 1,000 ideal clients?" I'm like, "Yep." And then he went to the CMO and he said, "All I have to do is get 2 people to sign up out of this 1,000, and this marketing pays for itself in the first month, right?" And the CMO goes, "Yeah." And he's like, "Have we ever had a marketing channel that works like this?" "No." And he's like, "Well, if I can't convert this, you need to fire me as the CEO, because either I am lousy as a spokesman, or our product isn't loved by the market." So we started, and Michelle, it was like fish in a barrel, right? He'd talk, he'd get all of these back, and they were covering their marketing costs, and then it was pure profit, right? After that. And so he just kept coming back and saying, "I want more interviews. I want to do more of these." They got other people on their team, and it's like, because they're not going to bring you back every 6 months to talk about your product, but maybe they'll bring someone else on, right? And we call them talents. And they had 4 different people talking to the market on how they were doing this. And then they got bought, and they got bought by somebody that was listened to them on a podcast, became a customer. So I guess that ended our relationship with them, but it then started the relationship with the company that bought them. And now we work with that company and a couple other ones they own. So, I always say our biggest challenge is obscurity. Right now, there's people praying for what you can do. And the reason they don't buy from you is because they don't know you exist. There's also people probably praying to buy a company like yours. And the reason they don't buy it is because they don't know it exists.
Right. Oh, yeah, this is fabulous. So what are some of the struggles that your kind of ideal client might have while they're listening to this and going, oh my God, Tom, we need you so badly?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is they realize what they're trying to optimize for, right? They've played around with this thing of optimizing for more leads, more Facebook likes. No, if you're a business owner, there's one thing they're optimizing for. It's called profits, right?
Yeah.
And the way you get profits is by bringing value to the people that that value the service that you're doing. So, you're optimizing for more ideal clients. And so I think the people that are working with us are the ones that aren't just going, I just want to do the newest little thing, or, metrics that are meaningless. No, they trying to get real business results. And these can be category design companies. This can be professional services, coaches, consultants, as I said, nonfiction authors. And they realize that they've got a story to tell and that they're the talent, right? Early on, we had a client that said, I love working with Interview Valet because you let me be the guest and you take care of the rest. I'm like, oh, that's good copy. I'm taking that. But really,
Right.
that's what it is, right? Yeah. Our clients are Sinatra. They get up there, we prepare them, they do the performance that only they can do, and we take care of everything else.
Love it. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start their journey with you?
Well, the easiest way is there's a lot of things we have. I mentioned that I wrote that book, Podcast Guest Profits: How to Grow Your Business with a Targeted Interview Strategy. That's like our whole gameplay, right? That's the recipe. And people said, well, why are you giving that away? I'm like, well, it's not a secret, right? If you listen to me, I'll tell you how it's done, right? But just the same way as a chef, once they tell you the recipe, some people will try making it and some people will do a good job. But, for me, I look at that recipe and like, let's just go to the restaurant. And that's what
Right.
our clients are. And really, it all starts out with, in life, I believe there's two answers. There's heck yes and no. So people come to us and we have a discussion. It's like, Michelle, what are your goals? Who do you want to talk with? Have we ever seen people get results with this? Have we helped them in the last 9 years? And we'll tell you straight out, heck yes, this will work. Here's how it works. Or no, we've never seen anybody, get results from this. And we'll be straightforward with you. And then, we put you together an entire roadmap. And it says, this is how a campaign would look like, because, we're looking for long-term relationships. We've worked with clients. The longest one now is 6 years. We're not just looking for little transactions, right? We want to make sure that we can get you results. And then you're saying, how can we have more speakers? How can we really double down on this?
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So of course we will have all the links to your show, or links in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on a new browser because we're not done yet. So Tom, I get to ask you at this point, at what point in life did you realize that you were especially kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Oh, I don't know if I ever knew that I was that crazy. I just knew that I was different, right? And I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, not the most entrepreneurial school in the world, but I had grown up in this middle class utopia. It was a wonderful life, right? And the answer was go to school, get a good job, and retire, right? And I'll never forget when I got out of the service after 5 years, when my commitment was up, my dad told me I was a fool, right? He's like, all you got to do is put another 15 years in to retire. And I'm like, I'll be dead in 15 years. And then I worked for corporate America. And after 18 months inside and getting promoted 3 or 4 times, I was like, this is killing me, right? I've got to go sell. And when I took the straight commission sales job, Michelle, my dad told me, he told me I was a dang fool, or words to that effect. He's like, you can't do this. You're married. You've got a mortgage. You've got kids. Right. And I I proved him that I could do that. And I think my whole life, I've just been in this way of, yeah, I've got to go somewhere different. And I call it the land of misfit toys. This is why we've got to get together, because the rest of the world looks at us, and looks at us as different. And we look at each other and say, why isn't everybody this way?
Right? I love it. You've been absolutely awesome, Tom. Any last words for our peeps?
Yeah. Mentioned this before. If anybody wants to get more information, just go to interviewvalet.com/BOP. It's for a business ownership podcast. There's an assessment we've got there, right? 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for you? We mentioned the book, Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. You can get it on Amazon. But if you want a free copy, just go back to the page. I'll mail you one if you're in the US. If you're overseas, I'll email you one. And then finally, if you looked at this and saying, this is interesting, I'd like to see how we could use this, how I could grow my business and my brand with that. I'll put my calendar scheduling link. All of that will be back at interviewvalet.com/BOP.
And again, of course, we will have that link in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down. Tom, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate all you do. Anybody that says doing a podcast is easy has never done it. You make it look easy.
Oh, thanks. Peeps, thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.